So what can you tell me here about this?
Have you seen a post mill before?
No.
Right. Basically, the whole of the mill body needs to be able to be turned to face into the wind.
Okay.
So that the sweeps are facing the wind when you need to grind.
Yeah.
Also, if there's strong winds and it gets hit from the back, it could actually damage the mill. It's not designed for tailwind, as it's called.
I see.
So the whole of the mill body actually turns and is one piece. So it's called a post mill because of this big oak post,
Yep.
which when I finish speaking, you can have a look through the door and see that.
Yep.
And this is the crown tree. So this huge oak beam, when you go inside, the whole of the mill body is built from that. If you look, there's no other connections. So if you came along with a crane, you could physically lift the whole mill body up as a single piece.
Wow.
And the reason is, so you've got a bearing, simple bearing in the middle there, a bit like a hip joint, that allows the mill to be turned. The other thing that's interesting is the post itself is not sitting on the ground. The reason being, because it's a machine, it's made of wood, everything moves, needs tensioning, adjusting and this, that and the other. So to keep the post vertical and keep the mill in alignment, what you've basically got are these sets of wedges. So you could alter the wedges to alter the alignment of the post. You can move it over or backwards, and all my wedges fall out. I need to come up with a way around that. Leave it down there. Then, and the way the post is actually held up and held off the floor is you've got the four, I can't try and remember the name, cross trees. No, those are the cross trees, which are just sitting on the four bases. So the whole mill is actually supported by those four bases, and the mill is pushing down on those, so they're trying to come apart, so they're in compression, and then these ones, cross members, are in tension where they're trying to pull them apart. So together they make up the system that actually holds the mill.
So these are four separate, they're not, those two aren't connected and these two aren't connected,
No,
are they?
that's a single large piece
That's
of
a
wood.
single piece,
And
okay.
that's a single piece of wood.
Okay.
The same as these are. The post itself is an oak post, which we believe the windmill first appeared on maps in 1703, and from some of the graffiti that's on it, that means that it's the original post. Probably a 200-year-old tree when they felled it, so you're looking at 1500 that it would have been a sapling. So
Wow.
we're more than 500 years ago that was a little sapling.
Wow. Was that on this space here or brought
No,
in
it
from
could
somewhere
have
else?
been anywhere.
Okay.
I think in those days everywhere there was a lot more forest.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a resource, the forest, wasn't it? So building ships, building houses.
Yeah.
So it was a cash crop, and they thought ahead in those days that my grandson's going to be rich when we fell all these trees. It wasn't instant gratification for the people at the time. And something else, the way the mill works, if when you get all the way up to the top floor, which is called the bin floor, you'll see this is the wind shaft that the sweeps are connected to, and a lot of the mill's driven off that. But there's also another shaft up here which has got a chain wrapped around it. And what that does is you lower the chain down through a trapdoor here, another trapdoor in this floor, and it actually comes down the stairs. We've got this board here called a sack slide, which folds down flat. And in fact the other part of the slack side for the bottom is this door here, which you take off the roundhouse and actually lay on there as well. So you then tie the end of that chain to a sack of grain, pull on a lever, excuse me, and the chain moves up, takes the sack in, up through that trapdoor, up through that trapdoor, and then ends up on the bin floor. When you go up there, you'll see there's 3 bins that store the wheat. This one here is a hopper, which has a wooden spout that comes down through the bottom of it and feeds the stones. So that's the bin floor. This is a stone floor, and then there's another spout that comes out from the bottom of the stones, comes out on the spout floor, where it's comes out of the spout and put into sacks.
Right.
And then we lower it through a hatch in there into the roundhouse, which is where we do the packing from the big sacks down into small 1 kg sacks. So you're using the wind to get it up there, and then gravity feeds the process, and the wind drives the stones to do the grinding.
Brilliant.
So it's tried to make as effort-free as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
And in terms of moving, rotating the structure, how is that done here?
Right. If you look at the unpainted lever, you see it's a long lever up there with a pivot point here.
Yep.
So when you pull on the rope, you get a big mechanical advantage, and you physically lift the steps off the ground.
Yep.
If you look at the tail pole, that is rigid to the mill body, and you've got it on a chain up there to support the weight of it. So you pull on the rope, the steps come off the ground, and then you physically push on the yoke
Yep.
and turn it manually.
Oh, wow.
It should, when everything's working right, be a one-man job.
That's what I was going to ask next. How many does it take? Just one?
But things are all a little bit out of balance and things. If you think it was 2003 they finished most of the restoration. In the intervening 20 years, things have moved around a bit because it was all green oak and this, that and the other. So it's a little bit out of balance. So it's a minimum two-man job now.
Mm-hmm.
But the more people you have, the easier it is.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to sort out why it's out of balance. And there's so many things. Like I said, the wedges for moving the bottom of the post around. So the post could be out of alignment. The mill body itself could have sagged. There's another adjustment. Because the mill body is sitting at the top there, you've actually got some blocks here which are adjustment blocks, so you could actually adjust the angle of the mill body. They're called wear blocks.
Mm-hmm.
That one is not adjustable. The idea is this one's sacrificial because the mill is front heavy. It's always going to have that block pushing, and this block is really just to stop the mill bouncing in strong winds.
Right.
So, you know, that we might be somewhere there at the moment. With wear blocks we can't do much more adjustment to.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the post could be out of alignment. We've got the wear blocks could need adjusting, although we don't think that's the case. It could be that since the body's been built because it it had to be basically made from new. All the old bits copied because the timbers were just so rotten. When you have a look around, you'll see there's a couple of original timbers, and they're obvious compared with the others.
Mm-hmm.
And another possibility is the mill last milled commercially in 1912, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically, it was non-economic anymore, so they just walked away, locked the door, and that was it. It wasn't until the 1980s when people started dismantling the mill to be able to try and preserve it. But the post is still the original, so that had 70 odd years of the mill leaking on it and things, and it's now had about 20 years of it being dry. So has the post gone from very wet being so huge?
You think it's bent a little?
It may have bananaed.
Yeah.
It may have leant over a bit at the top.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's at least four things it could be. Could be we can't adjust the bottom of the post anymore because if we cut, they've already cut some of that back because it was right against one of the quarter bars. So if we decide it's the trestle that needs adjusting, we may well actually have to lift one side and drop the other.
Right.
So slide some more bricks in.
Makes sense.
So it's something we've got to actually spend a few quiet days, maybe just two of us sitting here with taking lots of plumb line things and this, that and the other, and some what we can do is measure when we lift the step off the ground. If we get a water level, you know how water level
Yeah.
is, hose pipe?
Yeah.
We could actually measure it at various points around to see if the whole body, so we can see
Is
if
level.
the steps, because
Yeah.
the ground's not level, we'd have to use a water level to check it all the way around.
Yeah.
But it's definitely closer to the ground when the steps are off the ground on that side than it is on this side.
Uh-huh.
There's definitely something. And another thing is the whole of the mill body. It appears that I think it's this part is still dead level, but this part is actually leaning forward.
So it's not even straight.
It's
bent a little.
Yeah. So it's just sagging under its own weight, but it was all green oak.
Yeah.
So it's going to do that.
Amongst is it just your team here that is involved in this? Do you bring in architects and engineers to look into this?
when they were looking for funding to do the restoration originally, I think it was £60,000 they got from DFID, because it was a
who's DFID?
It's government food and agriculture. It's the farming part. Department for Farming. I think it's changed its name twice since then. But they had a scheme for rural investment in jobs and things, and they saw this as a scheme that was going to keep people employed. It wasn't actually full time, it was all volunteers, but they insisted, because they were putting that much money in, that we had a qualified person. But how do you get a qualified millwright? There are no training courses in this, that and the other, so we managed to find someone with a lot of experience that convinced them that he knew enough to make sure it wasn't a group of bumbling amateurs that were going to spend the money and get no results. As it turned out, it took an awful lot more money than that. So he was the only so-called professional. Everybody else was just doing what they could do. And you know, a group of different people, some with engineering backgrounds, some with woodworking backgrounds, and the team came together way before my time. I've only been coming for 4 or 5 years now. But they literally took the whole mill apart. The only things that were left here, and you'll see on some of the photos on the wall when you go upstairs, was the post and the wind shaft were held up with telegraph poles and scaffolding. That was all that was left of the mill on site. The rest of it was taken off site to a barn in the road towards Burgess Hill down there, and they faithfully copied lots and lots of the timbers, and then came back with a windmill kit.
That's great.
Put it together on site, and like I say, very little of it is the original timber because it was just abandoned for so long. And if it was non-economic in 1912 enough for them to walk away, when was the last time they did any major investment to repair it? But you could say it's just another iteration in its life. Because have you heard of Trigger's Broom from Only Fools and Horses?
Yeah, Trigger's Broom, yeah.
So between 1700 and 1912,
Yeah.
how much of it is actually from the original mill anyway?
Right.
There's actually an extension from the original mill body. If you look up there, you see the post coming down?
Yeah.
And the beam across there, that was originally the back of the mill. And the reason it's got an extension is there's a machine which I can't remember the name for it, but it's basically a sieving machine that grades the flour. So as people got more fussy about their flour, this grading machine, which is a drum that used to sieve the flour, was added to an awful lot of mills. So that's actually an extension. You can see it in the floor when you go upstairs as well.
Yeah. See it on the side as well that it's longer.
Yeah. So that, you know, that's one major change in the history of the mill, but there will have been loads of others. I have no idea what they are.
Yeah.
So you have a quick look inside.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We have to go into the other door. Chris is talking about the mill, but you can see these timbers that I'm saying.
Yeah.
And you can tell by the difference between these and the post that these are new replacement timbers.
Absolutely, you can see them, yeah. Very fresh compared to the central post.
And as you can see underneath, it's not touching the floor. So it's just these 4 brick pillars that the whole of the mill is supported from. If you look at the top, you have a look at the joints that they've used up there.
Yeah.
There is actually a mortise and tenon going into there, but the actual weight, which is just to stop it going sideways basically, there's just that Z-type joint there, which you can see down here behind that as well.
Right.
So it's the pressure coming down, pushing down on the top joint,
Yep.
that is holding the post up, and then these head joints down there, where the crossbars are in tension, so cross trees are in tension, that's holding it all together.
Yep.
So there's not a lot of nuts and bolts at all.
It's pretty impressive work, isn't it?
Apparently the guys that built the mills, quite often they were actually shipwrights. So when there wasn't a job doing ships, they'd come and build mills. When they couldn't be building mills or ships, they'd go and build houses. It's so much of the same skill set.
Pretty amazing to be doing that.
Yes, I've hand all with hand tools. No power tools of any sort. It was all chisels and hand drills and big saw pits, actually sawing the timbers up and everything as well. So
That's very cool.
okay,
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll let you wander up to the mill.
It's a beautiful day, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
Such a
We're
lovely
so
day.
lucky with this location.
Do you-
We've recently had this workshop built. One of the neighbours paid for it for us, and I spend a lot of time in there just with these doors open. Every time you turn around, you have to look up. Couldn't be a nicer spot, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have your open days once a month, do you get such a big team? Oh.
It seems like we've got a few more than usual, but no, they're all very familiar faces. And so it's the open afternoons most of the time, but there's twice a year we do a full open day, event day, where we have Punch and Judy Man, Morris Men, choir singers, ice cream man. So it's a much bigger day. It's a full day. This is really just people getting guided tours around the mill. Those are basically our main income to keep looks after the mill.
Yeah.
Just teas and cakes and money on the door.
I'll get some cakes afterwards.
Don't feel obliged to.
Thank you very much for
You're
explaining.
welcome.
Appreciate it a lot.
You're welcome.
I hope you've enjoyed part 2 of this video. Click the like button, share and subscribe. Leave a comment down below giving me your thoughts on this video, and see you on part 3.